share the Zest Solvent experiment, what I learned, how it changed the portrait. Here's the example of the portrait being created. I'm using the Montemarie portrait set. They're very inexpensive, not very good pencils, so keep that in mind for the experiment. I want to show here that I needed to create many layers of the pencil color pigment in order to create enough material for the Zest solvent to adhere to. I've previously done experiments where I try single layers of pencil and the Zest completely washes away, dissipates, and absorbs the color, saturates the paper. So make sure you have done enough layering for the Zest solvent to work with. I bought this because it is purportedly non-toxic and safe for pets and environmentally friendly. But apparently the solvents generally do the same thing. So this is the colored pencil portrait. I dip the brush into the solvent and then try to absorb some of the solvent in a tissue before I apply it to the face. Here you can see I get a bit ahead of myself and I'm applying way too much pressure with the brush. I'm actually not applying very much, but even not very much pressure is too much. You can see that all the volume that I built up with layering many layers of the colored pencils in peach and in light browns and in the reds and the whites to kind of try to build up a pink. It all just in one swipe of the paintbrush disappeared. So that's how powerful and strong the solvent is, and you have to be super careful. If you have put work into a colored pencil drawing, look at the left side. 2 strokes and the entire cheek is gone, and I'm going to have to find a way to try to build that back. But now that I've applied the solvent, it's going to be really hard because the pencil crayon will not adhere very well to the paper once it's saturated with solvent. Now I've learned my lesson and I'm dipping my brush in the solvent, absorbing some of the solvent in the tissue so it doesn't pool and scatter the pigment with too much of the liquid, and I'm kind of almost dabbing it. I wouldn't do it with a sponge. I thought about it initially, kind of placing the solvent on the portrait with a sponge in order to not have that brush stroke strip the pigment, but the brush stroke very lightly is necessary because you are trying to soften the pigment, and so it does need that contact, and also the sponge would end up absorbing the pigment into itself, and you'll find that there'll be a sponge shaped light spot where it was. So again, with the smaller features, a smaller brush, dipping it in, placing the brush alongside the paper and kind of just placing a light amount of solvent on the paper, and not so much that the solvent's going to drip or spread. I did experiment once with solvent and watercolor pencil, and when I used too much solvent, it just flooded away the pigment, and the pigment either absorbed into the solvent and disappeared or into the paper. Here I've gotten out some pastel and just very lightly, because now that the paper has solvent in it, it's going to saturate and quite a bit and also pop out quite a bit. The color is a little bit too strong, but beggars can't be choosers, and since I stripped away the color, I had to apply it that way. So that is the result after adding solvent to the colored pencil illustration.